What if I told you that a small, seemingly harmless machine, something that looked like a typewriter, turned out to be one of those subtle mechanisms that almost overnight reshaped the course of history? Imagine this. An empire entrusts its commands to the airwaves, convinced of the unbreakable strength of its cipher. Yet, behind closed doors, a group of people patiently transforms that impenetrable wall into nothing more than a thin paper mask. This was Enigma, and its story is one of scientific intrigue, human resilience, and the kind of decisions without which many battles of World War II might have unfolded very differently. Enigma was not born as a weapon of war, but as a commercial device. In the 1920s, engineer Arthur Scherbius developed an electromechanical cipher machine meant to protect business correspondence and commercial secrets. A box with a keyboard, light bulbs, and a set of rotors' simple mechanics and electrical circuits promised to make each message unique. But soon it became clear, when technology falls into the hands of armies, its role changes. The German military saw in Enigma the key to secure communications. Fleets, divisions, and command posts began sending their orders through it, confident that the sheer number of possible encryptions made it virtually unbreakable. Inside, the machine was deceptively clever. Pressing a key sent an electric current along a complex route through rotating contacts, then through a plugboard, Steckerbrett, until a bulb lit up on the other side, showing the encrypted letter. But with each keystroke, the rotors turned, altering the sequence of connections. The plugboard added another layer of permutation. The number of possible configurations was astronomical, billions upon trillions of combinations, making Enigma seem like an unpickable lock. Seem like it. Its decryption was not the triumph of a lone genius, but rather a long chain of discoveries, mistakes, thefts, and coincidences. It began not in Bletchley Park, nor in wartime Britain, but in interwar Poland. There, a group of young mathematicians, Marian Rejewski, Henryk Zygalski, and Jerzy Rojicki, approached the problem with mathematical rigor and boldness that few expected from mere code clerks. Rejewski, drawing on group theory and sharp analytical intuition, modeled the internal logic of Enigma and uncovered structural weaknesses. The Poles built the first devices to automate the testing of settings, early bombs, and created tables that moved the task from the realm of the impossible into practical reality. As the shadow of war grew darker, Poland's position became precarious. In 1939, on the eve of the German invasion, the Polish cryptologists shared their discoveries and even the design of their machines with their French and British counterparts. That act became the turning point that saved the Allies from starting at zero. And so began a new chapter, the story of Bletchley Park, a quiet English estate transformed into a vast laboratory of secret breaking. There, under the strictest secrecy, a motley team assembled: mathematicians, linguists, logicians, engineers. Their mission was not just to read the code, but to do so continuously, at a pace that matched the demands of war. The central figure, whose name has become almost symbolic, was Alan Turing. Yet Turing did not perform miracles alone, nor was he a magician who solved the problem with a snap of his fingers. He proposed mathematical methods and designed a device called the WWII electromechanical machine, capable of testing millions of rotor configurations far faster than any human could. Gordon Welchman made a crucial improvement to the bomb by introducing the diagonal board, which sped up the search process, and together they transformed educated guesswork into a systematic tool. The technical challenges were staggering. Cipher keys changed daily, messages flowed in and out at breakneck speed. Radiograms often contained errors and deliberate traps. Operators and cryptanalysts hunted for recurring phrases. Heil Hitler and other routine formulas at the start of the war often proved a lifesaver, searched for hidden clues, and combined lucky breaks with the raw mechanical power of the bombs. The logistics were just as vital as the cryptanalysis, intercepting radio signals, sorting them, routing them to the right sections, and processing them at speed. Success was the product of a finely tuned system in which human skill and machine power complemented one another. Even once decryption became a daily reality, the Allies faced a new dilemma: how to use the intelligence without revealing their advantage. Immediate responses to intercepted orders could have tipped off the Germans, prompting them to change procedures. Instead, most of the intelligence was applied with extreme caution. Operations were designed to make it appear as if the information had come from other sources: reconnaissance flights, espionage, or tactical scouting. This elaborate masking of the true source turned Ultra into more than just knowledge. It became a weapon that required diplomacy, cunning, and strict secrecy. The most dramatic consequences were felt in the Battle of the Atlantic. German U-boats threatened Britain's supply lines and convoys. Access to German communications allowed the Allies to predict submarine routes, reroute convoys, and send anti-submarine hunters to the right spots. Many historians argue this saved enormous tonnage of supplies and helped Britain survive its darkest years under blockade. In 1941, when British sailors captured documents and codebooks from U-110, it provided even more material for decryption and reinforced Bletchley Park's successes. The exact size of Ultra's contribution to ultimate victory remains debated, but what mattered was clear. The ability to read enemy orders gave the Allies a strategic edge that could not be underestimated. Enigma's breaking also sparked an unexpected technological leap. The machines built to sift through ciphers, the logical methods developed for them, and the sheer need to process vast amounts of data became stepping stones toward computing. The Colossus, built to crack the even more complex German Lorenz cipher, became one of the first programmable electronic machines, the ancestor of modern computers. The Bletchley Park community Turing, the engineers, the creators of Colossus, and the bombs shaped post-war computing, cryptography, and computer architecture. The irony was sharp. A device meant to conceal information gave birth to the tools for processing and analyzing it on an unprecedented scale. Yet the story carries somber notes. Many who worked at Bletchley Park returned to ordinary lives in silence. Their contributions remained classified for decades, their names invisible. Alan Turing, whose influence on computation and cryptanalysis was enormous, endured post-war years marked by tragedy and misunderstanding, and his death remains a source of sorrow and debate. Their stories remind us that scientific achievements often come at a heavy personal price. Beyond the technical and human elements, Enigma raises ethical questions that remain relevant today. What does it mean to have access to an adversary's secrets? Where is the line between military necessity and violation of privacy? War blurs those boundaries, but the lessons of that era shaped post-war norms about secrecy, control of information, and the impact of technology on society. In today's age of digital communication and powerful algorithms, these questions sound even louder. Who controls data? How is it used? And what does that mean for civil rights? In the end, Enigma is not just the story of an electromechanical device and its decryption. It is the story of how mathematics, engineering ingenuity, and human persistence could shift the balance of power. A small box with rotors became the key to a great game, one where intellect and secrecy proved more decisive than the roar of guns. The legacy of Enigma is layered. The foundations of modern cryptography, the dawn of computing, enduring ethical lessons, and above all proof that sometimes the fate of nations rests in the hands of those who sit in dark rooms, staring at strings of mysterious symbols. Like other great technological breakthroughs of war, Enigma reminds us of two truths at once. Technology can grant incredible power, but its meaning depends on those who can see it, understand it, and, when necessary, reinterpret it. In the fragile balance between secrecy and discovery, it was precisely the ability to perceive and then to act that decided the outcomes of so many battles in the 20th century. To understand why Enigma was considered unbreakable, one must picture its inner mechanics. At first glance, it seemed simple: a keyboard, rows of lamps, 3 rotating rotors, and a reflector. But each of these components added layers of complexity, turning a plain message into a labyrinth of electrical pathways. Each rotor had 26 contacts, corresponding to the letters of the alphabet. When a key was pressed, the current traveled through the plugboard, steckerbrett, where pairs of letters could be swapped, then through the rotors, each shifting the mapping a little further, then through the reflector, which sent the current back through the rotors along a new path, and finally lit a lamp with the encoded letter. After every keystroke, at least one rotor turned, changing the wiring for the next letter. If one counted all the possible combinations, the selection and order of rotors, their starting positions, the plugboard connections, the total was staggering. For the standard military Enigma, it approached 150 quadrillion possibilities. To German commanders, this meant no human effort, no army of codebreakers could possibly test such a vast space of possibilities in a reasonable time. They trusted the machine so completely that it was used at every level of command, from regimental orders to the fleets of admirals. But hidden inside this seeming invincibility was vulnerability. The weakness lay not in the mathematics, but in human use. German operators often repeated phrases, failed to change keys thoroughly, or left hints in their messages. Moreover, the machine itself had a structural flaw. No letter could ever be encrypted as itself. To a user, this was invisible, but to a mathematician, it opened cracks to exploit. The first to notice and exploit these weaknesses were the Poles. In the early 1930s, Poland founded a school of cryptography that gathered young mathematicians trained not only in traditional methods, but also in pure algebra. Marian Rejewski applied permutation theory to Enigma and succeeded in reconstructing the logic of its rotors. This was revolutionary. Instead of blind trial and error, he introduced a formalized mathematical approach. The Poles did not stop at theory. They created mechanical aids for key search. Among them were the so-called Zygalski sheets, perforated sheets that, when overlaid, revealed possible settings. Another invention, the bomb, was an electromechanical device that simulated multiple enigmas at once, testing combinations at what was then immense speed. These advances made the impossible possible. Under real-world conditions, the Poles could break German messages daily. But by the late 1930s, the Germans toughened the system, adding new rotors, more plugboard connections, and stricter keying procedures. The Poles realized they could not keep up alone. So, in the summer of 1939, just weeks before the outbreak of war, they shared their breakthroughs with the French and British. This act of cooperation became an invisible gift to the Allies, the foundation for what would later grow into Ultra. When war broke out, the struggle against Enigma shifted to Bletchley Park, a country estate surrounded by gardens, yet inside transformed into a factory of secrets. The atmosphere was unique, strict yet chaotic, scientific yet military. In huge huts, rows of bombs hummed and clattered like the heartbeat of a giant organism. Dozens, then hundreds of women operators, many of them students or former teachers, worked in shifts around the clock, plugging cables, monitoring results, recording settings. The daily routine was monotonous, yet within that repetition, miracles were born. Intercepted radiograms arrived at Bletchley, where they were sorted, checked for cryptographic hooks, and dispatched to sections specializing in particular branches of the military. If a Bombay found the correct key, it was immediately passed to the analysts, who decrypted and translated the messages. From there, the intelligence went to command-stamped Ultra, top secret. Even generals were not always told the true source. The war at sea highlighted most vividly both the strength and fragility of Enigma. German U-boats stalked convoys, trying to strangle Britain with blockade. Every radiogram between submarine and command passed through Enigma. Once the Allies began reading these messages, they gained a weapon that made no noise but saved countless tons of supplies. Convoys could be steered away from ambushes, or wolf packs could be lured into traps where destroyers and patrol aircraft awaited. This struggle was fought on a knife's edge. The Germans periodically changed procedures, introduced new rotors, and tightened discipline. Each time, it meant a crisis at Bletchley. Familiar methods stopped working, the bombs fell silent, and analysts had to return to chalkboards and wiring diagrams, seeking new approaches. Yet each time, persistence and ingenuity prevailed. Bletchley Park was not only a hub of technology, but also a socio-cultural phenomenon. It brought together people who in ordinary life would never have met. Aristocrats and village girls, professors and students, chess players, musicians and writers. They were united by secrecy and by the knowledge that their work, though invisible, was shaping the fate of thousands. They never saw the front, but they knew that every correctly broken key meant a ship saved, a battle won, a catastrophe averted. And yet, after the war, these people remained in the shadows. For decades, their contribution was classified. Many died, never knowing their work would one day be recognized as one of the decisive factors in victory. Only in the late 20th century, when archives opened, did the world learn the truth. Ultra shortened the war by years and saved hundreds of thousands of lives. But Enigma's legacy extends beyond the war. The logic of decryption, electromechanical machines, and the first attempts to automate analysis were the forerunners of the computer age. While working on the bomb, Turing was also laying the foundations of algorithmic theory and computation. Later, Colossus, built to attack the even more complex Lorenz cipher, became the first electronic computer using vacuum tubes. It was a direct bridge from cryptography to computer science. Today, Enigma is a museum piece, a symbol of a bygone era. Yet its lesson remains alive. It reminds us that no secret is unbreakable, that every technology is vulnerable to persistence and intellect, and that the fate of wars and sometimes of the entire world is not decided only on battlefields, but also in quiet rooms where people sit over ciphers and numbers. The Battle of the Atlantic was the theater where Enigma's decryption proved most decisive. German U-boats were a deadly threat from the war's outset. Their wolf-pack tactics relied on coordination. A single submarine would detect a convoy and call for reinforcements to strike as a group. Every such call, every order from command, passed through Enigma. In the early years of the war, the Allies were desperate. Convoys were sinking by the dozen, and the tonnage lost threatened Britain with isolation. By 1941, the situation had grown critical. But it was at this moment that Bletchley's work began to yield systematic results. Intercepted radiograms revealed U-boat positions, routes, and attack plans. This allowed convoys to be steered away from wolf packs, or hunters to be directed toward submarines. Capturing real materials was especially valuable. One of the most dramatic moments came in May 1941, when British sailors from the destroyer Bulldog captured the German U-boat U-110. On board, they found not only an Enigma machine, but also key tables. This prize was a goldmine for cryptanalysts. It allowed them to test their methods and accelerated the decryption process enormously. But the Germans adapted. In early 1942, they introduced a new naval Enigma with a fourth rotor. It was a shock. Decryption suddenly stalled, and the Allies were once again in peril. British convoys suffered heavy losses, and it seemed the advantage was gone. Yet persistence at Bletchley, further captures of cipher materials from submarines, and improved bombs overcame the crisis. By mid-1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had turned. The Allies systematically evaded attacks and sank U-boats in large numbers. Many historians see this as one of the crucial steps toward victory. North Africa was another theater where Ultra played a decisive role. Here, the Allies faced the legendary General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. His tactics were bold and inventive, and for months he outmaneuvered British forces. But behind Rommel stood the same communications system radiograms through Enigma. Once the Allies could read his orders, they gained the ability to anticipate the movements of his armored divisions, to know where he planned to strike, and to see his weak points. Information about supplies was especially critical. Desert warfare depended on fuel and water. Decrypted messages let the Allies sink fuel transports, and Rommel's tanks often found themselves stranded on the eve of offensives. One of the key moments was the Second Battle of El Alamein in 1942. Knowing Rommel's plans and being able to choke off his supplies, the Allies prepared their defense and struck back. The victory at El Alamein was a turning point in the campaign and a harbinger of the larger shift in the war. Winston Churchill later said, "Before Alamein we never had a victory. After Alamein we never had a defeat." And Ultra was the invisible hand that made this turning point possible. D-Day, the Normandy landings of June 1944, was the climax of secret intelligence use. Operation Overlord required not only the massive concentration of forces, but also an elaborate deception. The Allies had to convince the Germans that the invasion would come not in Normandy, but at the Pas de Calais. Decrypted Enigma radiograms confirmed that the Germans believed the ruse, particularly the existence of Patton's fictitious army, supposedly preparing to strike Calais. This knowledge was critical. It gave the Allies confidence that their deception was working, and that the main German forces would remain tied down away from the real landing site. Ultra also allowed the Allies to track the movement of German divisions, anticipate reinforcements, and adjust their plans. When the landings began, the Germans were still waiting for the main blow at Calais, buying the Allies the precious time they needed to secure the beachhead. The use of Ultra in these campaigns raises the question, how much did it change the course of the war? Historians debate this. Some argue that Enigma's decryption shortened the war by at least 2 years and saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Others are more cautious. But all agree on one point. Without Ultra, the war would have been far longer and far harder. This story also has a dark side. Strict secrecy meant commanders sometimes faced dreadful choices. They could not act on decrypted intelligence if it risked exposing the source. That meant some convoys were knowingly left to their fate so the Germans would suspect nothing. The price of the invisible war was terrible. Some lives saved, others sacrificed, all in the name of long-term advantage. And yet the true legacy of Enigma and Ultra goes far beyond the Second World War. This story became the foundation of modern cryptography, information theory, and computer science. It proved that mathematics can be a weapon no less powerful than guns and tanks. It showed that wars are won not only on the battlefield, but also in the minds of people. After the war, the history of Enigma and the role of Ultra remained hidden. The documents were classified, machines were destroyed or handed over to Allied countries without explanation. Even many Bletchley Park veterans, who had given the best years of their lives to this invisible war, returned home and went on with ordinary lives, forbidden to tell even their loved ones what they had done. For decades, the public believed that the victories in the Atlantic and in Africa were the result of commanders' military genius or sheer luck. No one knew that behind these successes stood young women taking shifts at the bomb machines, mathematicians filling blackboards with grids of numbers and letters, and thousands of unseen workers gathering and analyzing data. Secrecy also had a political side. After the war, British intelligence actively sold surviving Enigma machines to Allied and developing countries, never revealing that they had long since learned how to read the codes. As a result, many governments believed their communications to be unbreakable, while London and Washington could quietly listen in on their negotiations. This became part of the global intelligence game in the early years of the Cold War. Only in the 1970s, 3 decades after victory, did the first publications appear, shedding light on the secret. And it was not until the 1990s that the history of Bletchley Park was officially acknowledged. For many, it was a shock. The destinies of the greatest battles had been decided not only on the fields of war, but also behind the closed doors of cryptographic centers. The lives of those who had worked on Enigma unfolded in different ways. Some went on to careers in science and engineering. Others faded into obscurity, never living to see recognition. The most tragic figure was Alan Turing. His contribution to cryptanalysis and the theory of computation was invaluable. But in post-war Britain, he faced persecution and prosecution because of his private life. He died in 1954, never knowing that his name would one day become a symbol of an entire era. Today he is honored as one of the fathers of computer science, and his fate stands as a stark reminder of the cost of prejudice. The legacy of Enigma runs far deeper than it first appears. It not only shortened the war and saved millions of lives, but also marked the beginning of the digital age. Algorithms, machines, the first computers, all of these were born out of the race to master cryptography. Modern cryptography, the internet, and data security are direct descendants of that struggle. But along with this comes a lesson. Enigma reminds us, no absolute weapon or unbreakable cipher lasts forever. What looks like an impregnable wall to some, others will see as a crack. And often it is not brute force, but the power of intellect that decides the outcome of a battle. Today, as humanity faces the challenges of cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, and mass surveillance, the story of Enigma speaks both as a warning and as an inspiration. A warning that we must never rely on eternal security, and an inspiration that in the face of any threat, humanity still retains its greatest weapons: intelligence, creativity, and persistence. Enigma began as a commercial device, but became a symbol of a war of minds. Its breaking is a story not only of victory in one of the most terrible wars, but also of the birth of the very world we live in today.